Now, the ruling All Progressives Congress has criticized Phrank Shaibu, Special Assistant on Public Communication to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, over his claim that President Bola Tinubu's administration thrives on lies and deceit. In the statement tagged the 10 lies of the APC-led federal government, Shaibu accused Tinubu of allegedly using propaganda to deceive Nigerians. Reacting in a statement, the APC National Publicity Secretary Felix Morka chided Atiku's aide, saying he's still struggling to come to terms with the serial defeat the opposition PDP presidential candidate suffered at the poll and the Election Petitions Tribunal. For a conversation on this, we're now being joined by the APC National Publicity Secretary Felix Morka. Welcome to Newsday.
Thank you.
Thank you for making out the time to be here as well. So we've seen some of the points that were raised by Phrank Shaibu. Do we expect the federal government to release details of deregulating petrol landing costs to demonstrate that the federal government has not actually secretly paid for subsidies?
It was, somewhat irresponsible of Mr. Shaibu to make some of the comments that he made to label very serious national interventions of this government as lies. I mean, what's a lie? You can take issue with a policy. You can, have a different view and, even mount, a critique of a government's decision. But to label it as lies, I think that's just childish. Quite frankly, of Mr. Shaibu to say, which is why, we decided that, he wasn't thinking straight. He was being simply emotional, still convalescing from the defeat of his principal. So that's understandable, but he doesn't need to come into the public space to make those kinds of claims. But with respect to your specific question about subsidy and whether or not this government has reintroduced subsidy. As I said in my statement, that is not the case. The government is working hard, working with all of the key actors in the sector to maintain some, reasonableness and hold down, the price bracket, not in any way to dictate or enact a price regime, but to, find ways of, ensuring that we don't, needlessly escalate the prices so that people don't, groan more than they already are with respect to that product. But I'm sure that the managers of the, fuel system, the NNPC and the relevant other government agencies will, at the right time, provide information about the state of both the pricing, the landing costs, and other information that Nigerians, quite frankly, are seeking to know about this product.
All right, Mr. Morka, you mentioned lies. According to Phrank Shaibu, he has actually itemized many of them. If we were to take some of them, he says that the UAE visa ban debacle was a lie by the presidency, so to speak. He also spoke about the lie, which was the ringing of the bell at NASDAQ, and he also mentioned where the U.S. President and envoy and the Secretary of the State for African Affairs, Ambassador Molifi, was quoted saying President Joe Biden is asking to meet with you on the sidelines of the UNGA. He could go on and on about this. In his own assertions, these are blatant lies. You might say they were not lies, but it might be down to semantics. But when truths are distorted, for lack of a better word, some people might call it a lie.
No, there's no distortion of anything. Sometimes facts play out the way they do. And at the end of the program, anyone who is listening or watching those sets of facts may come to two, entirely different conclusions. Now, on the issue of the visa ban with the UAE, there was no lie told. Now, the emphasis may have been on the eventual outcome of that diplomatic, rapprochement. This is, anyone who knows diplomacy knows, it's not a one bam. It's not, something you do with the stroke of the pen. It's a process. Even if the intent, the principle in that conversation between the two leaders was to lift the ban, it is easy for anyone who is a witness to that conversation to suggest that the ban, has been lifted, or the ban, will be lifted. That there's been a principled agreement to, review that position and address the concerns of both governments. Now, yes, somebody may have listened, or you listen to it and you think it's a lie, but it's not a lie. Fact is that there was a meeting between the two leaders. Fact is that the two leaders discussed the issue of the ban and agreed to, review and resolve that problem. Now, I think that as a Nigerian, I want Nigerians to have access to every country of the world, not just the UAE. So any impediment to the free travel by our citizens.
Mr. Morka, the statement that was made by the administration was clear. And you're trying to weave this because for the UAE to issue a statement trying to clarify this particular issue showed that facts were distorted. You're trying to give a spin to it, but the UAE to respond meant that there were things that were said in the Nigerian media space that were not true. And when something is not true, semantically, it might be called a lie.
No, I don't agree with you. What the UAE did is a normal step within diplomatic engagement. Because when you say visas, the visa has been lifted, or the ban on visa has been lifted between the two countries. Somebody may leave the comfort of their home and go to the embassy to apply for a visa. It is not the Nigerian institution that will issue the visa to the UAE. It is the UAE institution. So they were trying to clarify, to make sure that it was, that people knew that it was not time yet to make, that approach. On a practical, pragmatic note, I don't think the UAE government came out to say there was no conversation or that the question of lifting that ban was not now in review, which will make it the lie that you are suggesting, or anybody may suggest. But the point here, and it's not about spin, it's about process. We can't be fixated on this, trying to nitpick about what is a fact and what is not a fact, or what is a lie. Fact is that this hopefully will happen, and will happen very shortly. And I think that's really all that matters in this conversation.
Oh, noted, Mr. Morka. You've made it clear that it's not a spin, but a process. Now, if we could touch on what's going on with the fuel subsidy matter. Some might see reason with points that were raised by Phrank Shaibu. But can you help us understand how petrol is still being sold at less than 650 naira per litre when the international price of crude oil is about $94 per barrel, and the exchange rate in the I&E window is about 780 naira to the dollar and 1,000 naira to the dollar on the parallel market?
I will actually differ on that question to the technical managers of that sector, the NNPC and others in government, in the ministry, who have hands-on information about the details and the pricing and the explanation as to why the price of fuel has remained relatively constant. But from where I sit as a car owner and as a driver, I am thankful that I can still drive into the station and purchase fuel at the prevailing price. And I think that Nigerians are thankful for that. Anyhow that has happened, I think that the government has not said that they have returned the subsidy regime. They haven't said that. And until they say that, all of this conversation is actually completely speculative and unhelpful, because the average person in the street, who bought fuel at the same price as they did today, is thankful for that. And now don't forget that if the government is, earning more in our petroleum oil exports, look, government is being very, hands-on and actually concerned about the pain that Nigerians are going through. So in the back end, I am certain that the government is doing everything that can be done to ensure that the price system does not, run in the direction that some of the critics would actually like it, so they can say, "We told you so." That's all this is about.
Well, Mr. Morka, we definitely see reason in what you're saying about that, but I'd also like to deviate a bit. If we want to look at another point that was raised, since we're dealing with Phrank Shaibu's situation here, if we look at when it comes to the cost of governance, we know that one of the things that the Tinubu administration clamored on was reducing the cost of governance. But we do have 48 ministers in this case. So there is some truth to that, one might say, if we look at what's on ground and the expectation during the campaign time. Mr. Morka, can you hear me?
Well, yes. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, I think that every government has an interest in reducing the cost of government, and actually passing off all of those savings to the people in terms of applying those resources to more tangible provisioning for social services, for security, for healthcare, for education, and all of that. But I think that you must also appreciate that every government has the right and the prerogative to decide about the scale that is required to deliver on the commitments and on the promise that he has made to the people. Now, don't forget, for example, some new ministries, like the Ministry of the Blue Economy, was created. You require a HEMS person to manage that ministry, because ultimately, these are also initiatives that will be productive, that will help government to mobilize resources and deliver on all of the key promises that he has made. So I think that we need to see the balance, where the balance actually falls. If the balance is such that the government is able to do more good than the cost, the relative cost of the government, then I think just the objective cost alone shouldn't be the dispositive factor here. We should wait also to assess the progress made, how well government is mobilizing those resources, using those institutions to create value, create wealth, build growth in the economy, and ultimately transfer the benefits to the people. At the end of the day, you must then find the balance in that matrix. It's not just a linear question here.
All right. Okay. Now, if we were to take you up, since we were talking about governance, Mr. Phrank Shaibu has described the Tinubu administration as a clannish government. Because in the president's inaugural speech, he says, as your president, and I'm quoting the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu right now, as your president, I shall serve with prejudice towards no one. But as it stands right now, Phrank Shaibu says it is a clannish government because the CBN, FIRS, Customs, Army, Police, Immigration is from the same area, or is from the same part of Nigeria. And he says things are not balanced, that there is gross nepotism in the government, even though the president said there will be prejudice towards no one.
Look, I don't think that this is a charge that is reasonable, even. The government is not engaged in any form of nepotism here. Now, is there any one of these individuals that you referenced who is not eminently qualified, who in a competitive type of headhunting will not pass muster? Is there anyone? You see, look, we need to just take a deep breath. All of the ministers who were appointed were selected from all of the geopolitical zones in this country. There are still to come many appointments that will be filled. In the appointments of service chiefs, care was taken to ensure that every, at least the key sections were represented. Because indeed, competence abounds everywhere, in every village, in every state.
Yes, exactly. Because
zone.
when you look at the federal character principle that is very obtainable in Nigeria, a lot of people always harp on this, that competence is not zoned to one particular place. Competence is broad and wide across all spectrums, across all localities in Nigeria. Hence, the criticism for the last government, and this government has actually just picked up for where the last government left.
Look, I've heard somebody say that this is, that vernacular part of our democracy that people will condemn, but actually has been a feature of our democracy. People make all kinds of arguments in justification. But look, I think that at the end of the day, if you take your mind back in the day, John F. Kennedy appointed his brother, RFK, as the Attorney General of the United States. And people raised the question of nepotism. And he says, look, is there anyone who disputes that, the appointee, who happens to be his brother, was actually competent and eminently qualified to serve the country in that capacity? And that shut down that conversation. Look, all I'm saying is that the appointments into offices and positions in this country under this administration is not done yet. It's still work in progress. So, let's not be in too much of a hurry to make definitive statements and conclusions that indict the government needlessly. Because, at some point, yes, we will pick. When we pick and we can look at the chart and see where it falls, then we can begin to make some of these suggestions. But I think it's still too early. There's a huge number of portfolios that are, waiting to be filled. And they will be filled with Nigerians from across the country, from across all of the ethnic, and geopolitical divide. So I think that we need to, just chill a little bit and allow for the president, who has the prerogative of these appointments, to do so, mindful, yes, of the federal character, but more importantly, of the need to bring competent, people to help this administration to build on the agenda that he has set for himself and for the country.
Well, Mr. Morka, we have about a minute left with you, but I know you mentioned earlier that regarding the price of petrol being sold at about 650 naira, you said it's NNPC that might be able to respond to that, but you're grateful as a car owner that you're able to purchase at that price. Would you consider, based on those that might think that in truth the government is making or has made some payments regarding subsidies, would your administration consider releasing some form of documentation so the Nigerians can make sense of what's really going on and gain a sense of clarity?
Yes, I think that the government does have a duty to manage every sector of our country transparently. I think that should be done. But at the same time, I think also that we need to ask for this information and use it as responsibly as possible. But often, what happens is that some people like Shaibu, will seek information just so they can engage in further mudslinging, which is unhelpful. But yes, I agree with the premise of your question that the managers of the oil sector and fuel sector should be able to provide a little more insight into what is going on at the back end. But as I said, and I want to close with that remark, that Nigerians today, irrespective of how this is occurring, at the end of the day, at the filling stations, I think are holding still and maybe even thankful that we are not seeing a dramatic rise along the lines of some of the gains on the price of crude oil.
All right, I want to say many thanks to you, Felix Morka, the National Publicity Secretary of the All Progressive Congress.